Good morning and welcome to the 5th Open Networking Summit. It's a real pleasure to welcome you and get you started. Open Networking Summit, as you know, is a non-profit organization. It is for the community, by the community, and we try to put up the show to help promote SDN and NFV. I want to introduce a few people quickly. By the way, I am Guru Parulkar. I serve as the chair of Open Networking Summit. Here is Sadef Oskana. She is VP of Operations and responsible for all logistics and operations. This is VB. He works with Sadef and contributes to all aspects of ONS as well. This year, we also had pleasure of having Ram Appalaraju, who worked with us to put this ONS together. And as you know, these are the people who work long hours for weeks and months to put this exciting show together. And yes, indeed, we have a very exciting ONS for you that includes not only all these talks, as well as a solution showcase, number of exhibits, as well as a very strong research program as well. Yesterday, it was very gratifying to hear from few people who have been to almost all ONS in the past, and they said that this year's ONS program is the best so far. And that was very nice to hear. So what makes this year's ONS special or exciting? I believe you will walk away with the following takeaway messages from this ONS. The first one is you will walk away believing that open source SDN and NFV are inevitable. 2 years ago, we said SDN is inevitable, but this year, the big realization, or if you look at how industry has moved, we can say with very high confidence that it is the open source SDN and NFV that are inevitable. Not only that, I want to go one step further and say that they are already here and they are ready for prime time. What I mean by that is you can take open source building blocks and start to build products and solutions and start to deploy them. They may not be ready for production deployment yet, but they are ready to be built products and solutions that can get deployed in the near future. My recommendation to you as individuals as well as you as companies is to embrace open source and run with them, because otherwise you may not be as relevant going forward. Okay? Now, open source SDN and NFV means different things to different people. So I thought I will take a minute to tell you or outline what we mean by open source SDN. So one way to look at open source SDN is to think of these closed proprietary boxes getting disaggregated into the building blocks on the right-hand side and available as open source software and hardware. If you look at the bottommost, we will have merchant silicon from vendors such as Broadcom, Cavium, Barefoot, PMC, Scipio, and number of them that will have a lot of capabilities using which you can build very powerful, what can be thought of as bare metal switches or white boxes. And on top of that, you will have open source building blocks that can be thought of as switch operating system to build the box. On top of that, you will have open source network operating systems that can manage, control a number of these boxes in a network. And then on top of that, there will be closed, proprietary, as well as open source applications and services that people will build. So that is what we mean by open source SDN, and similar model applies to NFV as well. Now, the next question is why open source SDN and NFV? The answer is relatively simple. There is pull from service providers that is extremely strong, service providers and network operators. there is technology push that is unstoppable. Now, it is true that the business models are not clear yet, that how one would build product solutions and how one would make money with this, but that is what people will figure this out because the incentives are very big. And that is what we call a perfect storm in the high-tech world. Okay? And that is very exciting because this means there is an opportunity to innovate, opportunity to transform products, solutions, and even the whole industry. Yes, indeed, it is threatening to companies that want to hold on to the legacy, and that is to be expected. Now, the next question is, why do service providers have this pull for SDN, NFV, or open source SDN and NFV? If you go around the globe and talk to service providers, they will tell you that they have two requirements at a high level. The first one is they want economies of a data center, and the second thing is they want agility of a cloud provider. Now, each service provider may articulate these requirements slightly differently, but at the end, they translate to these two generic requirements. Now, what do they mean when they say they want economies of a data center? What they mean is that they should be able to build their infrastructure like how data centers are built today. That is, they should be able to build their infrastructure with few commodity building blocks that are available as open source hardware and software. And for example, in the case of data center, there are bare metal switches that are used as leaf and spine switches. There are commodity servers, number of open source platforms and tools, and then on top of that, they do build their different types of applications and services. And with that, service providers also hope to be able to scale their infrastructure and still achieve CapEx and OpEx savings. By agility of a cloud provider, what they mean is that they should be able to introduce new services and new revenue generating services very quickly, as most of the cloud providers do today. Okay? So that is why there is a lot of pull from service providers wanting to do this. Now, this was summarized very nicely by John Donovan in his keynote talk last time in a question to why SDN. He said, because there is no army that can hold back on economic principle whose time has come. Okay? It was a very crisp answer to why SDN and why open source. There is also another quote that I thought I should mention. This is from Alex Choi, who is the CTO and Executive VP at SK Telecom, who says, the promise of open source SDN to deliver true cloud-like benefits to the network such as scale, automation, programmability, flexibility, and all of that is very critical for this sector, for this particular service provider. So the idea is being able to do all of this, still be able to have no vendor lock-in, still have interoperability and all of that. That is what service providers want, and that is why there is so much pull from service provider for SDN, NFV, and open source SDN and NFV. I mentioned technology push that is unstoppable. What do I mean by this technology push that is unstoppable? If you look at all the way at the lowest level, there are merchant silicon like Broadcom that are giving you 1.6 terabits of full duplex capacity on a single chip, right? With all the functionality that you need that even the equipment vendors have in their ASIC. Not only that, KVM is now giving a chip with the same kind of a performance, but also programmable. So you can program the forwarding plane. Similarly, there is a startup, the rumor has it, that they will also give similar or more capacity and more programmability on top that you can do with a programming language like P4. And then, on top of that, thanks to Facebook and Open Compute project, there are a number of software building blocks that are becoming available. So you can take the merchant silicon, get this open source software, and put this bare metal and white box together, and that will be pretty capable. Then there are open source network operating system, at least two of them that have a lot of traction, ODL and ONS. On top of that, now people are like ONF, they are starting to create distributions, open source SDN distribution called ATRIUM. OPNFV has described a reference implementation, and now Arno just came out, the first distribution for that. And then, of course, people are building use cases and solutions on top of that. So when you look at this, this is phenomenal technology push. I want to invite at this point Dan Pitt, who is going to talk briefly about ONF's ATRIUM distribution.
Thank you, Guru, and good morning. Are we on here? Yes, yep. We are. Well, good morning. This is the shortest keynote I will ever have given. And I just want to talk about this. ATRIUM is something that we announced last Tuesday. It is an open source SDN distribution. And it really brings together the three thrusts we have this year. Last year, our theme was simple as ABC. This year, it's as simple as open, 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 open SDN, OpenFlow, and open source. Guru mentioned a number of the excellent pieces of open source software that are available on the market through these dedicated consortia and sources. What we're doing is integrating them into a narrow but useful vertical stack that you can download and run. It will be available shortly at the end of the month. Application, control plane, forwarding plane. The application, just the first one. This is a framework on which we in the community would build out much more. Very simple BGP peering based on open source Quagga. The control plane, ONS. We work closely with them to build in the features that give us application portability and switch interoperability. And an OpenFlow southbound interface 1.3 to a forwarding plane built by us as an OCP switch, of which we have two examples. The Open Compute Project CEO, Corey Bell, is in the audience today. If he could stand up for a moment. And there he is, back there, Corey Bell. If you haven't met him yet, try to meet him this week. We've been great partners at making this actually happen. Now you see that we have 7 switches along the bottom. 2 white box switches based on OCP that we built using Acton and Quanta, bare metal, and then 5 others from Centec Networks, Corsa Technology, Netronome, NoviFlow, and Pika 8. These are different implementations, different pipelines of OpenFlow 1.3, but they all work with the same application and the same control plane through 2 particular features. One, you see the OpenFlow 1.3 plugin that each of them wrote and put into ONS. So ONS didn't have to do this customization. It's very simple. You deliver your switch and your driver. And then inside of ONS, something called the Flow Objectives Interface, which keeps the application separate from the pipeline in these switches. And that Flow Objectives Interface says, here's what I want out of the flow, and don't tell me what order to put the pipeline in. This is almost a radical way of finally making independent the forwarding plane pipelines from everything above it. We hope this is a model for many things to come. We in the community are already porting this to Open Daylight, including the Flow Objectives Interface. You can see it in the Solutions Showcase. This is the first time there's ever been anywhere this number of interoperable OpenFlow 1.3 switches running under completely open source software at the application level and at the control plane level. So come and see it. It is a sign of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. So you can see this is happening. Now, briefly, I want to tell you about when we talk about this open source project, these are not open source projects that are like a couple of guys in the garage. They build some software, put it on GitHub, and call it an open source project. They have architects and developers, significant. Oops, okay. They have established processes, release cadence. They have compelling solutions and use cases, and some of them are starting to be used in products and actual solutions that are deployed as well. So this is something serious. In each one of these cases, there are some serious industry participation as well from service providers, vendors, and so on. So, this technology push that I described, that is unstoppable. I believe in that because of what is going on with all these open source projects and what is happening with the community. Okay, I wish I can say at this point I can stop, declare success, and step down. Okay, unfortunately, life is not that easy. There are some concerns that people mention. So, for example, one concern is open source platforms lack features and functions. It is true that most of these open source platforms right now are not there in terms of features and functions that are compatible or on the same par with what is available maybe in the commercial products. But the way to think about it is, given all the pull and push I described, they will get there. Okay. The second concern that people mention is that there are too many open source projects, and because of that the mind share is split, resources are split, and are we really going to make open source happen? My take on that is, it is perfectly okay to have all these projects going on for at least multiple reasons. One reason is that the space is big, market, I mean if you look at network infrastructure space, that is very large, and so you need different types of open source solutions, and so maybe some of them will succeed, more than one. And another thing is, always competition and choice is good. I don't think it hurts. And at the end of the day, it is possible that some of them will fail and some of them will consolidate, and all of that is good. That is part of evolution of the industry, and that is perfectly okay. Having said that, I should mention that it is not, we should not take it for granted that just because we start an open source project and because we have a number of companies supporting it and all of that, that open source project will be successful and will deliver what is required. So for example, everybody thinks that Linux is the biggest open source project, and you know the story of blind man and an elephant, right? We all are trying to copy in some sense the Linux model, and we look at it very differently, and it's not clear whether we are going to have the same success that Linux did. And not only that, whether that is necessarily the right model. Even if we understood that model correctly and try to apply, it's not clear whether that is the right model for this time, for this industry, and where this industry is. And so what that means is that we will have to invent our own models and make that happen. The second thing is the business model, and that is definitely something we as the industry is still trying to figure this out. What I can tell you about the business model is that the pie is going to get bigger given everything that is going on in the networking space, in the computing space. The network infrastructure industry is going to grow only bigger rather than smaller. How this pie is going to be split is open to interpretation, but one thing that can be said is that the value is going to move from closed proprietary boxes to software, solutions, and services rather than the closed proprietary boxes. Now the fact that we don't know the specifics of it, what that means is that is what makes it interesting and exciting, how to figure this out. If all of this is pre-known, then the industry will be much less interesting, and there is a less opportunity to innovate and make an impact. I think I'm going to split this slide and move on to the next. Okay, so what are the goals of ONS 2015? So I think the goals of the 2015 is basically assess and debate the state of open source SDN and NFV. I'm telling you my point of view, but I want you to make your own decisions, make own judgment. But not only that, if you are a believer, this is also an opportunity for you to influence how open source evolves, how this particular industry evolves, and this is your opportunity to do that. As I mentioned that the business models are not clear, so again ONS, one of the opportunity at ONS is to debate the business models, try to figure out what is likely to work, and plan accordingly. And so in support of those goals, this is what we have done. If you look at all these open source projects that I mentioned, what you will see is that at ONS program, there have been tutorials on each one of them. There have been there were developer tracks, and there are talks about each one of them during the program. So you have an opportunity to learn, debate, discuss all of that. Okay? And by the way, there are exhibits and solution showcase. There are actual deployment that you will see on the show floor as well. Okay? And there are multiple stakeholders that are represented here at the summit. There are early adopters that are here as well. If you look at number of service providers that are leaders in deploying SDN, deploying NFV, wanting to use open source, and you will hear from them, and you have an opportunity to interact with them as well at ONS. Of course, there are presentations from number of vendors that are going to talk about SDN and NFV solutions and use cases and open source strategies and business model that they are following. This is your opportunity to assess as well as challenge these vendors that are wanting to do open source, challenge them whether they are true to that model or not, or they are trying to be open source but still wanting to push proprietary solutions as well. So this is an opportunity to do that. Okay. There is a solution showcase, as I mentioned, that is going to demonstrate 19 or 20 solutions that are built primarily using open source building blocks. There are proprietary components as well, but primarily the solution showcases are built using open source building blocks, and you should check them out. There are 35 plus companies that are represented in the solution showcase, and there are 70 plus companies that are exhibiting or participating at the show floor, so you should check that out. We do have a closing panel as well, that is open source SDN NFV ready for prime time and ATRIUM. So this is at the end of the show. After you have heard everything, we are going to debate whether it is really true or not and whether you are ready for it. And if you look at the list of participants, you can see they represent different organizations, a vendor, a service provider, a venture capitalist, and all of that. So hopefully all the stakeholders are represented, and we will be able to talk about where we are and what the challenges are.